The gas station attendant watched him fill a can, until the man said, "My wife and kids are out of gas." It was just after midnight on a cold November evening when the flickering lights of the small gas station glowed against the empty highway. Snow had started to fall in soft, quiet flakes, the kind that made everything feel still and a little lonely. Behind the counter stood Mark, a tired gas station attendant who had worked the night shift for 12 years. He liked the quiet hours. Fewer people, fewer problems. Most nights, he simply restocked shelves, brewed weak coffee, and watched the security cameras flicker between empty pumps. That night, a battered old van pulled slowly into the lot. The engine coughed, like it was breathing its last breath. Mark watched through the window as a man stepped out, tall but hunched against the wind, wearing a thin jacket that had seen better days. The man walked straight to pump number 3 and reached for the nozzle, but instead of putting it into the tank, he picked up one of the red plastic gas cans from the rack. Mark thrown it. People who filled cans usually had a good reason, but at this hour it always made him suspicious. The man inserted the nozzle and began filling the cans slowly. $5? 10? 15? Mark kept watching. When the total reached $22, the man stopped, hung the nozzle back, and stood there staring at the can as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Mark felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came when he had to confront someone. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. "Sir, you have to pay before you leave with that," Mark called across the lot, his voice sharper than he meant it to be. The man turned, and for the first time Mark saw his face clearly under the harsh, fluorescent lights. His eyes were red, not from drinking but from crying, and his hands trembled as he held the gas can. "I know," the man said quietly. "I was coming inside now." Mark walked closer, ready to tell him the store only took cash after 11, ready to watch another person walk away angry. But when the man spoke again, his voice cracked like thin ice. "My wife and kids are out of gas about 4 miles back," he said. "They're sitting on the side of the road in the dark. I promised them I'd come back with enough to get us home." Mark stopped walking. The wind carried tiny snowflakes between them, and for a moment neither man moved. He looked past the man to the highway stretching black and endless in both directions. 4 miles. In this cold, "Which children, how many are with you?" Mark heard himself ask. "Soften out, my wife and our 3 little ones," the man answered. "The youngest is only 4. Mark felt something shift inside his chest, something heavy and familiar. He thought of his own daughter, now grown and living 3 states away, and how he had missed so many of her cold nights, because he was always working these same shifts. Mark stood there in the snow, the red gas can still in the man's shaking hands. He glanced at the register inside, then back at the highway, swallowed by darkness. 4 miles was nothing in a warm car, but on foot with a can of gas in this weather, it felt like 40. The man's thin jacket was already dusted white, and Mark could see his breath coming in small, frightened clouds. "Come inside where it's warm," Mark said, surprising himself with how gentle the words came out. The man hesitated, then nodded and followed him through the glass door. The little bell above jingled, like it always did. But tonight it sounded different, almost hopeful. Mark walked behind the counter and looked at the total still glowing on the pump screen. $22.47. "I only have $19, the man said, pulling crumpled bills from his pocket and laying them on the counter like an apology. "I walked here hoping it would be enough." Mark stared at the money. $19. Not even enough for a full tank on most days, and certainly not enough to get a family home safe. He thought about the rules, about the cameras recording everything, about the owner who counted every penny. Then he looked up at the man's face again and saw something that made the rules feel very far away. "Wait here," Mark said. He disappeared into the small office behind the counter and came back carrying another red gas can. This one already full. He set it down beside the first one. $40 worth, he said quietly. "That should get you there and back twice, if you need it." The man's filled so quickly that tears slipped down his cheeks before he could stop them. "I can't take your money," he whispered. "You don't even know us. I know what it feels like to be scared for your kids," Mark answered. "That's enough." The man tried to speak, but only a broken thank you came out. Mark lifted both cans and carried them to the door. "Let me drive you," he said. "My truck's warm, and it'll be faster." "You'd do that?" the man asked, as if kindness this size was something he'd stopped believing in years ago. Mark just opened the door and nodded toward his old pickup parked beside the building. Snow was starting to stick to the ground now, and time felt suddenly precious. They loaded the cans into the back and climbed in. The heater roared to life, pushing warm air against their cold hands. As they pulled onto the highway, the man kept staring straight ahead, clutching the dashboard like he was afraid the moment might vanish. "My name's Daniel," he said after a minute. "My wife is Sarah. The kids are Emma, Noah, and little Grace. We were driving home from her mother's funeral. The tank was supposed to be enough, but we took a wrong turn somewhere and ended up lost." Mark nodded, keeping his eyes on the dark road. He understood wrong turns better than most people. The headlights cut through the falling snow until they found the van, parked crookedly on the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking weak and tired. A small figure stood beside it, waving both arms. As they got closer, Mark saw it was a woman wrapped in a blanket, her hair damp from snow, her face pale with worry. When she recognized Daniel in the passenger seat, she started running toward them before the truck even stopped. Daniel jumped out and met her halfway. They held each other so tightly that Mark looked away, giving them the privacy of the dark. Then tiny voices came from inside the van. "Mommy, Daddy's back," followed by the sound of doors opening and children spilling out into the cold. Mark climbed out more slowly. He lifted the 2 full gas cans from the truck bed and carried them over. The children stared at him with wide eyes, cheeks red from cold, clutching their mother's legs. The littlest one, Grace, had tears frozen on her lashes. "This kind man brought gas," Daniel told them, "and he drove me so I wouldn't, to walk." Sarah looked at Mark, then at the cans, then back at Mark again. Her mouth opened, but no sound came at first. Finally, she whispered, "God bless you. I was so scared. I kept praying someone would help us." Mark set the cans down and knelt so he was eye level with the children. "You all stay warm now, okay? Saeed," softly. Grace reached out and touched his sleeve with her tiny mitten. "Are you an angel?" she asked. Mark smiled, the first real smile he had felt in months. "No, sweetheart. Just someone who knows how cold the world can feel sometimes." Daniel poured the gas while Sarah bundled the children back into the van and turned the heater on, full blast. When both cans were empty and the engine turned over strong and steady, Daniel walked back to Mark one last time. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You gave us more than gas tonight." "You already did," Mark answered. "Seeing your family safe is plenty." Sarah came over then, carrying something small wrapped in a napkin. She pressed it into Mark's hand. It was still warm. "Grace made cookies for the ride home," she explained. "We want you to have one. Actually, have all of them. We have everything we need." "Now," Mark looked down at 4 slightly squashed chocolate chip cookies. He started to refuse, but the look in her eyes stopped him. He took them gently, as if they were made of gold. Daniel reached out and shook Mark's hand, then pulled him into a quick, fierce hug. Sarah hugged him too, and the children waved from the windows as the van pulled carefully back onto the highway. Mark stood in the snow until their taillights disappeared. He climbed back into his truck, set the cookies on the seat beside him, and just sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet. When he finally drove back to the station, the snow had covered his footprints completely. Like the night wanted to keep the moment sacred. Back inside, he placed the cookies on the counter and took one slow bite. It tasted like home, like love, like every Christmas he had ever missed with his own daughter. Tears came without warning, warm against his cold cheeks. He never saw that family again. But every night after that, when the station grew quiet and the snow fell soft against the windows, Mark left an extra gas can filled and waiting by the door, just in case someone else needed to get home to the people they loved. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change someone's world.